You're watching Reuters TV. Here are your top stories.
Candidates vote in France's unpredictable election.
The Champs-Elysees gunman was a former convict who'd served time for assaults on police.
We go where high tech and high alcohol content combine.
This is Reuters Now.
Key French presidential contenders Marine Le Pen and Emmanuel Macron casting their votes on Sunday in one of the most unpredictable elections France has ever seen. Conservative François Fillon and leftist Jean-Luc Mélenchon voting too, both still in with a chance of winning the first round vote. 11 candidates are seeking the presidency. Only 2 will go through to a runoff on May 7th. The final days of the campaign were overshadowed by an attack in Paris which saw a police officer killed. Nearly 47 million people are eligible to vote, but early indications show turnout is low, although not quite as low as in the 2012 election. Expats around the world voting too, hundreds queuing in London to cast their ballots. Current President François Hollande voting in Toul. He decided not to run for office again after polls showed he was the most unpopular French president in recent history. For voters across France, security is high, with 50,000 police officers deployed across the country. France has suffered from numerous attacks in recent months, which has prompted the rise of right-wing discussions. The result of Sunday's first round could see a significant shift in French politics and alter the country's position on the world stage.
A police raid on the home of the suspected Champs-Elysees gunman, French national Karim Cherfi. Neighbours painting a picture of a former convict who lived with his mother, usually sitting glued to his computer, hardly ever leaving home. Cherfi was well known by authorities and had served time for armed assaults on police going back 16 years. While in prison, he shot and wounded a prison officer after seizing his gun. He was arrested again this year on suspicion of preparing an attack on police. After Thursday's attack, Reuters' Julien Pretot was one of the first journalists to arrive.
We arrived at the scene about 15-20 minutes after the shooting, and police were looking very, very nervous. We spoke to a witness who said he fears for his life. He was next to the police van when the shooting happened, says he thought he was going to die. Because the Champs-Elysees are a very, very crowded area, especially in springtime. You know, in the early hours of the night, it's very crowded. But he was really targeting only the policemen.
In the car Cherfi drove on Thursday, police found a pump-action shotgun and knives. Having driven up to a police van, he targeted it using what's thought to be a Kalashnikov rifle. By the time it was over, a policeman was dead, and so was he. 2 other people left wounded. Investigators finding a note next to the suspect's body defending Islamic State. As France prepares to vote on Sunday, far-right anti-immigrant presidential candidate Marine Le Pen seizing on Thursday's attack, calling to immediately reinstate border checks and expel foreigners on watch lists. Authorities say they're now hunting for a second suspect who may still be at large. An uneasy but not uncommon prospect for a nation already living in a state of emergency. Since 2015, terror-related attacks here have killed more than 230 people.
Raj is a Sri Lankan fisherman who sought asylum in the U.S. after he was kidnapped by Tamil Tiger separatists. But there was a catch. A U.S. judge determined that the $500 ransom he paid to escape the rebels amounted to material support for terrorists. After years in immigration detention, Raj was granted a waiver under rules for people who may have supported terrorists under duress. He settled in San Diego and now has a green card. He asked Reuters not to show his face or use his full name.
Thank you very much.
But U.S. President Donald Trump is considering abolishing these sort of waivers, and that could affect more than just one Sri Lankan fisherman. Reuters Washington correspondent June Torbati.
U.S. immigration law has a very broad definition for what terrorism is, and it's a definition that encompasses armed groups that fought authoritarian regimes, as well as payments made to a terrorist group under duress or under force. So if this policy change goes through, those individuals who fall under those definitions would be barred from the United States and would have really no legal recourse.
Such waivers have been granted to Kurdish groups that battled Saddam Hussein and persecuted members of the Hmong ethnic minority in Vietnam and the Karen in Myanmar.
America is the most generous nation on immigration. We admit 1.1 million people a year.
Immigration hardliners, such as U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions, have warned the waivers pose a security risk. Asked to identify a case of a waiver recipient engaging in a terrorism-related case, a U.S. Customs and Immigration spokesman referred Reuters to the FBI, which referred the question to the State Department. A State Department official could not point to examples of beneficiaries who have, quote, gotten into trouble after arriving.
A show of force in Cologne. Protesters pushed back by an army of police officers deployed as the right-wing anti-immigration Alternative for Germany party met for policy talks. Police deployed 4,000 officers to manage the angry crowds. 2 officers were injured as protesters continued to pour onto the streets. As tensions rose, demonstrators launched flares at police. But their anger is at the AfD. The party opposes Chancellor Angela Merkel's decision to welcome over 1 million migrants over the past 2 years. Its co-chief suffered a body blow as she met with delegates. They've dismissed her plan to forge alliances with other parties rather than seeking to be a long-term opposition force. The party is polling between 8 to 10% support ahead of September's election. That's enough to give it seats in Parliament for the first time ever, but its popularity has been sliding.
Turkey's main opposition party fighting last weekend's referendum result, filing a court appeal on Friday against the process granting President Tayyip Erdogan sweeping new powers, contesting a decision by electoral authorities to accept unstamped ballot papers.
Even though the constitutional institutions in Turkey have mainly lost their function, even though they are under pressure and besieged by political authority, we believe that there are judicial authorities in Turkey who will identify these basic realities.
The tightly contested referendum is the biggest overhaul of the country's political system in nearly a century. Preliminary referendum results gave a narrow 51.4% in Erdogan's favour. The slim margin has seen days of street protests, with opposition parties claiming the poll was deeply flawed. Erdogan and government ministers have rejected criticism of the vote as politically motivated. Prime Minister Binali Yildirim, whose post will cease to exist once the changes come into effect, called the appeal attempts useless.
What if technology gave us the power to turn this enemy into an ally?
Microsoft and its partners are using smart traps to capture mosquitoes and sequence their DNA to fight disease. There are over 100 million pieces of DNA in every sample. With the Microsoft Cloud, we can analyze the data faster than ever before. If we can detect new viruses before they spread, we may someday prevent outbreaks before they begin.
To cells, they cost money, and so we need that money in order to make this happen.
The march is putting Trump's questioning of climate change and proposed cuts to federal science programs at center stage. Other rallies took place in New York, Chicago, London, Berlin, and beyond. In Washington, posters mocking the president lined the crowds. Science groups held discussions to promote environmental issues. Jennifer Molnar is the lead scientist at the Nature Conservancy's Center for Sustainability Science. She too is concerned about funding, especially after Trump's budget proposal included a 31% reduction to the Environmental Protection Agency. Molnar hopes the march galvanizes the public.
Whether it's providing us with clean air, clean water, giving us medicines that keep us healthy, I think it's really important for the public to understand, see some of the exciting science work that's going on, and then be able to speak out for why it's important.
A message these folks here hope the White House hears loud and clear.
And good for the planet.
We are marching today to remind people everywhere, our lawmakers especially, of the significance of science for our health and prosperity. The process of science has enabled humankind to discover the laws of nature. This understanding has in turn enabled us to feed and care for the world's billions, build great cities, establish effective governments, create global transportation systems, explore outer space, and know the cosmos. Without scientifically literate citizens, the United States, any country in fact, cannot compete on the world stage. Science brings out the best in us. With an informed, optimistic view of the future, together, we can, dare I say it, save the world!
A deadly attack on an Afghan military base. Taliban fighters dressed in military uniforms talking their way through checkpoints before opening fire. Soldiers were targeted as they ate dinner and left a mosque following Friday prayers. There's conflicting reports on the death toll. The Defence Ministry confirming it is over 100 soldiers killed. Officials speaking anonymously put it at least 140. This man, a nearby resident, says he heard some explosions which sounded like rockets before the fighting began. The Taliban claiming the attack in a statement. Up to 10 of its fighters are believed to have infiltrated the base in the northern city of Mazar-e-Sharif. The major headquarters is often used by foreign military advisors. However, no international troops were involved in Friday's attack. The Western-backed Afghan government has locked in a prolonged war with Taliban insurgents and other militant groups.
You're touring the Scottish Highlands, the hills, the sky. You're about to order a whiskey cocktail straight from the source. Finally, the moment you've been waiting for. But this isn't Scotland.
I'm Reuters' Matt LaRotunda, and I'm in an upscale bar in London, where the bartenders are serving real drinks, but with a virtual reality flavor. As prices for headsets like these come down, it's becoming easier for businesses like this one to cash in.
Pedro Paulo, the bar manager here at the One Aldwych Hotel, is something of an artist. Order his whiskey cocktail and you get the virtual tour as a bonus. And the headset isn't advertised on the menu. It's a surprise. He says he came up with the idea when he saw a VR headset used at a trade show.
I thought, why don't I do something that could take a guest that doesn't have necessarily the knowledge of how things come to life and give them that knowledge, give them that experience, show them how things are made. It hit me. Okay, I need to do something like that.
Virtual reality gear carries a steep cost. The headset can easily go for several $100s or more. But it is getting better. A recent industry report expects costs to decrease by 15% each year as more is invested in the technology. Sales of headsets and VR content now skyrocketing. The market predicted to jump from $453 million 2 years ago to $35 billion by 2021. And it's showing. Once confined mostly to video games and the entertainment industry, VR is now cropping up everywhere, from museums like this one in the Netherlands to brain research at the University of Seattle. And yes, even pornographers are taking advantage of it. Pedro says he paid about $120 for his headset, money pouring into this technology, and businesses tasting the results.
You're up to date. Check back later as stories develop.